Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Venezuela is denouncing the U.S. for docking a United States warship in Trinidad and Tobago as tensions in the region continue to rise. The Pentagon's also sending the world's largest aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald R. Ford, to the Caribbean. The carrier can hold 90 airplanes and attack helicopters. On Friday, the Pentagon announced the U.S. had struck yet another vessel in the Caribbean, killing 6 people. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said the victims were suspected drug traffickers, but offered no proof. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro accused President Trump of fabricating a war.
Y el pueblo de los Estados Unidos lo sabe. And the people of the United States know that they're making up a new eternal war. They promised that they will never enter a war, and they're making up a war that we will avoid. How? With the mobilization of the peoples of South America. As South America and the Caribbean all say, no to war, yes to peace, yes to prosperity, yes to harmony, and living together.
On Friday, the Trump administration sanctioned Colombian President Gustavo Petro, his wife, and other Colombian officials. In recent weeks, Petro's denounced the U.S. attacks on boats in the Caribbean. Also on Friday, 10 former Caribbean leaders denounced Trump's military escalation in the region. The former leaders wrote, quote, "The gravity of the present signals demand we use all existing channels for dialogue to perpetuate a zone of peace," unquote. We'll have more on this story after headlines. An Israeli drone strike in southern Gaza has killed 2 people as Israel continues to attack Palestinians 2 weeks after the U.S.-brokered ceasefire went into effect. Officials in Gaza say Israel's killed about 100 Palestinians over the past 2 weeks. Meanwhile, Israel's continuing to limit aid into the famine-stricken Gaza Strip. This all comes as Hamas is expanding its search for the remains of 13 deceased Israeli hostages in Gaza. Over the weekend, a team from Egypt and the Red Cross entered Gaza to help with the search. We'll have more on Gaza later in the program. We'll speak with Dropsite News' Jeremy Scahill. On Sunday, Israel carried out multiple strikes in Lebanon, killing 3 people. UN peacekeeping forces in Lebanon also shot down an Israeli drone. The UN forces said the drone had dropped a grenade near the peacekeepers. Israel denied the claim. The U.S. federal government shutdown has entered its 27th day. Funding for food assistance programs used by over 40 million people will run out on Saturday. Democratic lawmakers have criticized the Trump administration for refusing to draw on a contingency fund to continue funding SNAP and WIC benefits. Meanwhile, President Trump has said military troops will keep getting paid, in part due to a $130 million private donation. The New York Times has revealed the donor to be the reclusive right-wing billionaire Timothy Mellon. Budget experts say using a private donation to pay troops would violate federal law. Meanwhile, Democratic Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut appeared on CNN Sunday and said Trump is using the shutdown to expand his power.
He likes the fact that the government is closed because he thinks he can exercise king-like powers. He can open up the parts of the government that he wants. He can pay the employees who are loyal to him. I mean, this is a leader who is trying to transition our government from a democracy to something much closer to a totalitarian state.
President Trump has arrived in Japan, the second stop on his Asia trip. On the flight to Japan, Trump refused to rule out running for a 3rd term in 2028, even though the 22nd Amendment forbids a president from being elected to office more than twice. On Sunday, Trump met in Malaysia with leaders of Thailand and Cambodia who signed a deal to expand their ceasefire. On Thursday, Trump will meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping in South Korea during the APEC summit. Over the weekend, the U.S. and China agreed to the framework of a new trade deal. On Saturday, over 1,000 South Korean protesters rallied in Seoul to protest ahead of Trump's arrival.
나라 살림을 더 많이 지금 돌봐야 되는 상황.
At a time when our country should be focused on managing our own finances, the U.S. is acting like a robber, sudden, coercive, and almost plundering us, asking us to invest $350 billion, which is an absurd amount, and nearly 80% of our foreign reserves in the U.S. all of a sudden is far too forceful. I believe South Korea should firmly express its refusal to this demand.
In other trade news, President Trump's announced he's raising tariffs on Canada by 10%. The move coming in response to an ad produced by the government of Ontario that featured a clip of former President Ronald Reagan warning of the dire consequences of high tariffs. In Argentina, far-right President Javier Milei's party won a decisive victory in Argentina's midterm elections, picking up 14 seats in the Senate and 64 in the lower house of Congress. But it's still short of a congressional majority for Milei's party. It comes after President Trump earlier this month promised a $40 billion bailout for Argentina if Milei's party was victorious in these elections. After the results, Trump told reporters, quote, "We've made a lot of money based on that election," unquote. Since taking office in 2023, Milei has imposed painful austerity measures on Argentina, slashing thousands of government jobs and curbing public investments in infrastructure, healthcare, and education, which led to widespread protests. Earlier this year, Milei appeared on stage with Elon Musk at the conservative CPAC conference in the U.S., wielding a chainsaw and giving it to Elon Musk to symbolize cuts to government programs. Voters in Ireland have elected the independent socialist Catherine Connolly to be president. Connolly's a critic of NATO, who's accused the United States and Britain of enabling genocide in Gaza. She spoke to supporters in Dublin Saturday.
I will be a president who listens and who reflects and who speaks when it's necessary, and a voice for peace, a voice that builds on our policy of neutrality, a voice that articulates the existential threat posed by climate change.
The United Nations is calling for the safe passage of civilians trapped in al-Fasher in Sudan's Darfur region after the UAE-backed paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, RSF, announced they've seized the Sudanese army's main base in al-Fasher. The Sudanese army has yet to acknowledge they've lost control of al-Fasher. The city's been besieged by the RSF for 18 months, leading to widespread famine. The civil war in Sudan erupted in 2023. Since then, more than 150,000 people have died across the country, and about 12 million have fled their homes. Hurricane Melissa has intensified to a rare Category 5 hurricane expected to make landfall in Jamaica Tuesday and pass through Cuba and the Bahamas later this week. Melissa could be the most powerful storm to hit Jamaica in recent years. The U.S. National Hurricane Center in Miami warned Jamaicans to remain sheltered during the storm. Forecasters are warning of catastrophic flash flooding and landslides throughout the Caribbean. In Virginia, a 24-year-old Honduran man was fatally struck by a vehicle while fleeing federal immigration agents Thursday. Josue Castro Rivera is at least the fourth immigrant to be killed during an immigration operation under the Trump administration. Meanwhile, protests are continuing in Chicago over ongoing ICE raids. On Saturday in northwest Chicago, federal agents deployed tear gas at residents who gathered to protest ICE activity. The incident occurred as parents and children in the neighborhood were preparing for a Halloween parade. Meanwhile, White House advisor Stephen Miller appeared on Fox News Friday suggesting Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker could be arrested for seditious conspiracy for obstructing the enforcement of federal immigration laws.
Different kinds of crimes would apply. There's obstruction of justice, there is harboring illegal aliens, there is impeding the enforcement of our immigration laws, and then as you get up the scale of behavior, you obviously get into seditious conspiracy charges, depending on the conduct, and many other offenses.
A federal judge has ruled ICE agents illegally detained a Chicago man whose daughter is undergoing cancer treatment. Ruben Torres Maldonado is a painter and home renovator who was detained by immigration authorities at a Home Depot in suburban Chicago earlier this month. In his ruling, U.S. District Judge Jeremy Daniel said Maldonado's detention violated his due process rights and that he must be given a bond hearing by October 31st. In Maryland, hundreds of activists and Democratic state legislators rallied in Annapolis Saturday, calling on Governor Wes Moore to end the state's contract with Avelo Airlines, a private airline carrying out deportation flights. Avelo has cut several routes amidst growing backlash and a nationwide boycott after it signed a $150 million contract with ICE earlier this year. This is Maryland State Senator Clarence Lamb.
When it comes to the state of Maryland, we have this airline that's flying through BWI Airport that we don't believe shares our values. And so anything that we can do to shut down these ICE flights, many of which are probably illegal, as we've seen from Supreme Court determinations, that we want to do our part. And if we can stop Avelo from flying out of BWI, that would be all the better for our state.
U.S. immigration authorities detained the prominent British Muslim journalist and commentator Sami Hamdi on Sunday at San Francisco International Airport. Hamdi was detained hours after he spoke in Sacramento at a gala for CARE, that's the Council on American Islamic Relations. In a statement, CARE said, quote, abducting a prominent British Muslim journalist and political commentator on a speaking tour in the United States because he dared to criticize the Israeli government's genocide is a blatant affront to free speech, CARE said. The far-right activist Lara Loomer, who's described herself as a proud Islamophobe, took credit for his detention, saying she'd pressured the Trump administration to revoke his visa. And here in New York, Democratic Socialist mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani spoke before 13,000 supporters in Forest Hill, Queens on Sunday night.
Together, New York, we're going to freeze the... Together, New York, we're going to make buses fast and... Together, New York, we're going to deliver universal... We will make our city one where every person who calls it home can live a dignified life.
Mamdani spoke alongside Senator Bernie Sanders, New York Congressmember Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, and New York Governor Kathy Hochul, who's endorsed Mamdani over former Governor Andrew Cuomo. In recent days, Mamdani has repeatedly faced a string of Islamophobic attacks. If elected, Mamdani would be the first Muslim mayor. Early voting began on Saturday. A record 164,000 people cast ballots on the first few days. In a late endorsement, Democratic Congressmember Hakeem Jeffries has also backed Mamdani. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks for watching Democracy Now! On YouTube. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to make sure you never miss a video. And for more of our audience-supported journalism, go to democracynow.org, where you can download our news app, sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to the daily podcast, and so much more.